Hello, everybody. Welcome back. The next session is going to explore the issue of resilience. Now, we just heard about what an extraordinary 12 months it's been, particularly for farmers facing extreme weather events, enormous volatility of the costs of the inputs that they need in order to provide and grow their foods. There's been disruptions as well as a result of COVID and difficulties getting things to market because we didn't have the drivers to do it. So farmers have been through an awful lot. This session is going to be exploring the concept of resilience and how that applies to the agriculture sector. We're now going to start using Slido, which is an interactive tool, because it's your opportunity to engage with us. So what you need to do now, because I'm about to open a Slido poll, is you need to go to slido.com and you need to put in AGRI Outlook. When you get there, you need to choose session 4, which is the yellow color, if you're using the color code, and you'll understand that this is a session looking at resilience. I need you to go onto Slido and get into that, because the question I'm going to ask you, and we're asking you all, we're going to create a word cloud with the poll. What does resilience mean for you? So far this morning, we've heard a lot about the policy environment, we've heard about the political environment, we've heard about some of the deep challenges of the last 12 months. And in this session, we're going to explore from the farmer's perspective what it means for individuals on their farms, people working in the agri-food business. But here we want to also understand your perspective. So with the word cloud, you can just put in a word and I will see in real time, it will generate a picture for us. What does resilience mean for you? Because resilience is a word that you hear a lot about, but what does it actually mean? Does it mean the ability to bounce back? Does it mean the ability to do what you were doing before once the disruption has slowed down? Does it mean the ability to adapt to change? Does it mean that you have enough money in the bank? If you have a bad harvest, you can still carry on. What does resilience mean for you? We're going to be exploring that with some speakers, and we've got some farmers and other experts to talk about this, but we wanted to understand what it means for you. And we're starting to get some messages in. People have said it's the ability to deal with change, to have a strong mentality. It means zero pollution, sustainable growth, adaptation, bouncing back over the long term, not the short term. So these are some of the messages that you're telling us that this is what resilience means to you. Adaptation is coming in the front of our picture, which is a sign that many of you are putting it in. And the adaptation is to the different changes and the different shocks that might come to the agricultural sector that are both direct, like bad weather, but also indirect. It might be the cost of gas, it might be the cost of getting things to market. It might be the inability to get things to market. For example, when COVID meant that shops weren't open or people couldn't get drivers to get your produce from one area to the other. So we're getting lots of really good input, and please keep putting it in there because I'll be asking our speakers to keep referring to it. Lots of messages here about toughness, complexity, elasticity, interdependence. So these are all different things as you reflect on resilience, on what they mean. So if this is what you think resilience means to you, I'm now going to introduce my first speaker, who's going to be giving us some perspective on what resilience means in an agricultural context for farmers across Europe. And I'm delighted to introduce Miranda Meeuwissen, who's a professor at the Wageningen Research University in the Netherlands. Miranda, the floor is yours. Please make your presentation. And while we're waiting for Miranda to connect and to fix our technical issues, let me keep looking at the messages that you are sending us. Recovering quickly and survival. Yes, that's certainly a form of resilience. Food security. Well, we've just heard from the FAO just how many people across the world are facing chronic food malnutrition and inability to buy what's available. The complexity is clearly also something that came through in our earlier presentations, understanding how food is linked into well-being, humans around the planet, but also what farmers are able to grow, and also the inputs they need and getting it into market. So lots of good messages. Positivity is coming through as an idea. Being able to have adaptation to the changes, elasticity, and I think this is an interesting point. Many of you will have heard of survival of the fittest, which is Charles Darwin's famous message. And people tend to think that's of the strongest, but it isn't. If you look at what he originally wrote, evolution is the survival of those that are most able to respond to change. So this is exactly what we're talking about here. Coping with change, toughness, yes. Regenerative. I know that's a topic we're going to be picking up later in other sessions, picking up on this issue of regenerative agriculture. And if you remember what Tassel said, he said food starts with soil. If we have health in our soil, then we're able to grow food and move forward. Tough conditions, yes, being able to acknowledge that as farmers you have the difficulties of every year, different harvest or a lack of rain, and that the tough conditions are going to continue, particularly around the volatility of pricing. I think we're still having difficulty getting our speaker, so maybe we'll be moving on to the next element. Let me see if I'm able to bring in my next speakers. Do I have? No, we'll keep going with this then. Okay. Strong local farmers and systemic approach. Let me pick up on that issue of systemic. If you remember what Beth said, she said that farming and agriculture is linked into health, nutrition, climate, energy, rural lifestyles, and that it's connected into things like peace and security. So it's clear that we need to have a systemic approach, and that we've moved from talking just about agriculture and farmers to understanding how these things are connected. Young farmers is a message that's coming through under resilience. That's also an interesting point, because for a long time in Europe, we had an issue that young people left farms to go and look for jobs in the city. So resilience is having young farmers coming in and seeing a future in farming in Europe, seeing them being able to create a life and being able to earn money from it. So income is there, and a stable income. Capital. I think that's an interesting, and this is perhaps to do with the investment capacity. When we talk about the green transition and farmers doing things differently, this is a major investment, perhaps in new equipment, new crops, testing new ways of doing things. You need capital and funding to do that. And so that's clearly an element in resilience that we've come up in. Somebody's put in their trade-offs. And again, this is an important issue. For a long time, we thought that you could either have very productive, fertile land, or you could have environmentally friendly land, which was less useful. And now we need to understand, have more nuances in the trade-offs, looking at resilience. We've also got viability, positivity, trade-off, and with withstanding adversity. Organic farming is starting to come forward, and this is an interesting area because organic farming is obviously growing in Europe, but there's also been a question, will that be able to produce at the levels that we need to feed the world? And as a reminder, what we just heard from Beth is that we have 800 million people around the world who are facing insecurity. I'm delighted, I think we've fixed our technical issues, and our next speaker, Miranda, is able to join us. Miranda? Please go ahead. And remember, we're interested in hearing your perspectives on resilience. We just saw some amazing inputs from our audience with such a broad range of issues they brought forward, which gives us the issue of the concept of resilience is no longer just a word. I'm really getting a 3D picture of, positivity, the managing to resist change, young people going into farming, capital being available, doing things differently. Are those all the things that you see as elements from resilience?
Thanks for the introduction, Tamzin. It's very nice that you asked these questions while we didn't hear your word cloud developing. So it's a bit difficult to answer your question. But a few things that I heard are part of the big picture of resilience. Now, I'm also not so sure what you're seeing. I don't see myself, and I also don't see my slides. So maybe you can open up slides. Although I only see them partly, which is a bit, for me, okay, but I hope that the audience has a better picture.
Yes, we see.
Maybe you can go first to the first slide. I see just part of it, but I hope that the audience sees it correctly. Yeah, there we go. bit smallish, but yeah, so I would like to speak with you. Thanks for this very nice invitation about resilient agricultural systems. Insights from the Sure Farm project. A really nice project we did together with 11 regions in Europe, and we learned a lot about resilience. So I hereby thank the Sure Farm Consortium. Yeah, so now feel free to go to the next slide. So we had this question too. Yeah, could you go to the next slide? So we were asked and we were looking at resilience in very different farming systems in Europe. So we had different systems with all kind of different challenges. So the map is awfully small and the text even smaller, the way I see it. But we looked at, for instance, the north of Spain, where it's super dry and the extensive sheep farming system has really difficulties to cope with the drought. We looked at the Dutch, very intense, too intense arable farming system in the up north of the Netherlands, and so on. So we had very different challenges across Europe. And the main question was, what is the resilience in these different systems? So can you go to the next slide? And Tamsin already mentioned very well, resilience is more than only on the left-hand side, the robustness, the bouncing back. Maybe the richness of resilience is that it opens our eyes for more than bouncing back. It opens the eyes for also adaptation and transition. You see on the right-hand side, that picture where we have a path to a new system. Maybe we cross a tipping point. Maybe at the bottom of that right-hand side picture, there is a gradual path of change. But change, transition is part of the resilient thinking, because that may be in some situations the best way of dealing with the shocks and challenges that we are facing. Well, my background is very much on the left-hand side, so the robustness, the bounce back, thinking of resilience, so the contracts, the loans, the insurance, the money on the bank account, as Tamsin mentioned. I see more and more that resilience, dealing with shocks, requires more of the right-hand side, the path of change. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So here you see our Minister of Agriculture, Mrs. Schouten, and she asked the question, very nice project results, but tell me, how do we then measure resilience? That's her question. And she's very right in asking that. If you see in the ball, in the circle, it says resilience actually is a latent concept. And latent concepts are not so easy to measure. So her question is very, very right. And it's not such an easy concept to measure. But many people say resilience, wow, you cannot measure that. I definitely don't agree with that. It's a rich concept. It's difficult. It's latent. And it has many dimensions. But yes, we can measure it. There's different angles, different perspectives, but yes, we can measure it. Like we had difficulties with measuring sustainability 20 years ago. We're now thinking resilience is difficult to measure, but yes, we can. Yes, we can do that. And I show that on the next slide, please. Here I show the richness of the resilience concept. If you disentangle it in these 5 steps, resilience of what, to what, for what purpose, through these 3 capacities, and then understand the different resilience attributes, you bring together all that, what we just heard in the word cloud, different dimensions of resilience. And of course, when we were doing the preparation for this talk, I don't come up here with one metric. One metric for resilience, no, I don't give that. But I give these different angles, these different steps in the approach of resilience, that if you understand all these components, you get this picture of resilience. And that is what we did in these 11 farming systems across Europe. And we got this rich insight in resilience. And the few icons on the right-hand side indicate that some of these resilience measures can be measured quantitatively with the accountancy data. And some of them can be measured and assessed more qualitatively in group discussions, getting to know what the different opinions and local preferences are. And you see at the bottom also these icons refer to, sometimes you look at individual farms, but sometimes you have to look at the region as a whole, because the region determines to a large extent what we are really meaning with resilience, what functions are there preferred in the region. Okay, next slide, please. It's good that I also work a lot with students because they always ask these super critical and relevant questions as well. They ask, nice story, Miranda, but how can we study all these capacities and all these resilience questions? And there we are in this nice big European projects. You can explore a lot. So I would say these 3 circles here give the answer to the students, and they like to work with that. So look at past trajectories to understand resilience responses in the past. How were shocks dealt with in the past? Look in the middle to actual crisis. For instance, we looked very detailed to what happened in the COVID lockdowns last year, and we learned so much about the flexibility in the systems. And do also the right-hand thing. Discuss future scenarios. Discuss out-of-the-box scenarios where we are going to. That is what the students can work on and what we all can work on to understand resilience. Next slide, please. The students' question is relevant. The Ministry of Agriculture question is relevant. But the questions from the business, the banks, the cooperatives that visit us in post-academic education is also very relevant, because they want to learn, how can we build resilience? How do we know what are the future-proof farming systems? Because those are the ones that we want to finance and that we want to work with in the markets for the years to come. So these are also the relevant questions that relate to resilience. And it's not included in the picture here, but these 5 structured steps that I just showed, these 5 resilience, offward, toward, forward purpose, and the capacities and these attributes, that is the answer to these banks and cooperatives and corporates that want to understand the future-proof systems. Can you go to the next slide? I'm almost there. And this slide says, and time is ready for this. So we have been discussing in the recent 20 years a lot about sustainability. Now this complementary concept of resilience is connected to our discussions. It's not only about sustainability, but also doing sustainable business in terms of in times of shocks and uncertainty and challenges. And time is ready because I see more and more that, for instance, on the right-hand side here, we keep on thinking more and more beyond the silos. And that is what we need to understand resilience. And look at the middle picture here. We discuss more and more different functions for different regions. And that is exactly what resilience is about. It is looking to dealing with shocks and stresses in the regional context. And time is ready more and more for that, to discuss it in that context. And on the left-hand side, there's more and more integration of different knowledges and multidisciplinary type of approaches. And that is really what we need to measure resilience. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is in case you are interested in further reading. There's much more to say about resilience, but let's go to the final slide. And with that, I would like to, on the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so on the next, on the final slide, it says that thanks for this invitation. And I hope that I contributed in this way to the point that resilience is a measurable concept. Not with one metric, but with several metrics together, we can get that insight in resilience.
Thank you very much, Miranda. That was extremely helpful. And you know, you didn't see the word cloud, but many of the things that you identified in the elements of resilience and the metrics that we bring together came out in our word cloud. The issue of flexibility, complexity, sustainability, adaptation, stable incomes, young farmers, these things were all being put forward by our audience. So the elements you talked about, the things that you bring together and this ability to look at the path of change, I think that's a really good point that I'll be picking up with our next speakers. So thank you very much, Miranda, for joining us this morning, and I apologize for some technical problems that we had at the beginning. Let me now
No problem at all.
Let me now introduce my next two speakers, because we wanted to go from the theory to the practice. And we've got two farmers who are coming to share some of their experience with us, what they've experienced over the last 12 months, and looking forward to what they hope for the future. So I have Simon Vetter, who's a farmer from Wetterhof, and Morgan Oddi, who's a farmer from Via Campesina. Simon and Morgan, hello and welcome.
Hello.
Let me start.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Simon, let me start with you. Just give us an insight on what the last 12 months have been for you on your farm. What are some of the experiences you've had, the difficulties and challenges that you've had to deal with?
Well, hello, my name is Simon Vetter. I'm an organic vegetable farmer from the western part of Austria. We cultivate on 30 hectares of land. We stop beef production this year due to market reasons. We are organic since over 30 years. And for us, the last year was quite tricky, especially because of our geographical location. We are located in an area where you can reach within a diameter of 2.5 hours, 6 different countries. In 20 minutes, I'm in Germany. In 5 minutes, I'm in Switzerland. And in 20 minutes, I'm in Liechtenstein. So closed borders, and that was one of the first measures, was quite a tricky thing for us, because I get my plants from southern Germany, my seeds from France, my machinery from northern Italy. That was quite a stressful experience. We market every product which we produce on our own. So we are really strong in self-retail. We distribute around 1,000 vegetable boxes. They look like this. Yeah. To our customer in the region. 50% of these boxes are delivered by cargo bikes. And this was really good that we already had an existing structure to kind of do delivery stuff, and we didn't have to set up something new. What was really stressful for us is that in normal years, we cooperate with around 25 restaurants. We deliver them with our products. That was quite a challenge because we had 4 lockdown, or we are currently in the 4th lockdown in Austria. It means restaurants were closed. So we had the problem that we planted crops for them and their kitchens were empty and they had motivated staff. So we came up with the idea that they could kind of produce products out of our veggies and preserve them, and we sell them in their shop and our shop. So just to present you a few examples, this is a hot chili sauce. This is a syrup we made out of beetroot and ginger, Austrian organic ginger. This product just was awarded for the organic product of the year in Austria. And we had a hell lot of beetroot last year, which was actually planned to go into gastronomy. So we thought of other techniques to kind of preserve or at least value add products. And we came up with a very traditional preservation method in Austria. That's distilling. So we made beetroot schnapps in cooperation with a young artist from Rotterdam. This is our COVID edition with a bat and a beet. And the pandemic is still not really over for us. Restaurants are supposed to open Monday morning. Orders are coming in. But as some of you might know, things can change quite fast right now in Austria. So we don't really know what will happen in the next months. Thank you.
Simon, thank you very much, because I think you have wonderfully illustrated many of the elements that Miranda talked about and that we saw in the word cloud, about flexibility, sustainability, creating a stable income, the ability to change and adapt and use the organic assets that you had, and working in your close local networks within a very local food chain to find solutions. So it's wonderful to hear not just the problems you faced, and I hear here the border closes. If you're so close to 6 countries and you get all of your materials and input across the border, I can see just how challenging that must have been in the beginning. I bet your phone was burning a lot while you were making all of those calls to try and sort that out. Morgan, why don't you share with us just some of the challenges or experiences that you've had in the last 12 months?
Okay, good morning to everybody. So I produce vegetables in Brittany. My farm is 1.3 hectares, so it's a very small farm. First, I never stopped farming during the pandemics because, of course, people do need us to produce the food. And particularly in this period with lots of stress, during the lockdown, the people were afraid of lacking food. And so the people were coming to our farms to make sure that they could still buy the food. So our neighbors, the people around our farms, they count on us. They count on the local farmers to provide them with good, fresh, healthy food, and in particular, in order to strengthen their immunity. And I think that we, the small-scale farmers, we are very much committed to the people. And besides that, there were really no reasons to stop producing because, I mean, most of the small-scale agroecological farms are very resilient. Farming based on agroecology is very resilient, which I am in an area where there is a lot of very, very industrial livestock farming. And I see that, for example, in this kind of farming, industrial farming, if there is no more import of soybean, for example, coming from Latin America, they would stop producing. But it's not the case in my farm because I am very autonomous in my production. Basically, I depend on what I produce and on neighboring farmers as well. For example, the manure I use comes from a neighbor who has a dairy farm. And it is part of our values to have this autonomy, to not depend too much on a lot of inputs which come from very far away, but instead to try to create strong links with the neighbors, to exchange seeds, for example, on all those things. And this makes us very resilient.
Thank you, Morgan. Let me now ask Simon and Morgan, I'll come to you again. What advice would you give to farmers if they're thinking about how they can build their own resilience? And obviously you've described how you've survived the big changes of the last 12 months. What's the big advice that you think you could give another farmer on how they could build their resilience to future shocks? Simon, let me start with you.
Well, thank you very much. I think for me, there are two main important issues. One is capacity building and the other one is innovation. And just let me explain you this, the case of my farm. We are really close to our 1,000 customers and we have a really close connection to them. This helps us, of course, in a lot of ways, and communication plays a key role there. So if we had very harsh weather conditions like this summer, it was very wet. So I have to explain my customers why cabbage is a bit smaller than it used to be in December because of bad weather conditions in August. But this helps us also in other issues. One thing we conducted several times already at my farm was crowdfunding. You all know, at least those who are engaged in farming, farming is a wonderful business to spend a hell lot of money. And it's very capital intensive. So, and we thought, well, why not ask our customers? We already have a platform. So we financed together with our customers new tractors, new storage facility, greenhouses, planting machines, electric delivery vehicles. And this helps us on two sides. One, of course, finance. It's a nice thing. They give us money and we kind of pay back with our products. So our products are kind of already sold. And on the other hand, it also helps us in terms of customer loyalty. With this, we are able to kind of create a network which is strong enough to stand even bigger shocks. And there are bigger shocks kind of, I mean, that's the pandemic is just one out of several threats that could occur. Just to mention a few, climate change or the loss of biodiversity or or any other bigger accidents. Another very important aspect for me is innovation. If I talk about innovation, I really want to highlight the aspect of digital tools along the whole value chain of our farm. We put a lot of effort and investment on that in the recent months and years. And if people think about digital tools on farms, they probably end up with precision farming and GPS-steered tractors. You will find GPS-driven tractors on my farm, but that's not the thing I want to talk about. We really live in a historic time if it comes to for farmers to market their products on their own, to kind of really cut out the middleman. Because with digital tools, for the first time in history, we do not depend anymore on merciful retailers, or as it is the case in Austria, on basically oligopoly organized food market structures to just do whatever they want with us as producers. We can really take a seat in the driver's seat and have the steering wheel in our own hand. And I think we cannot overestimate the importance of this development on this innovation side. And just to give you an example how difficult that is for me as a farmer, I made a software, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I couldn't run my business otherwise. And this is farm-based innovation, yeah. And so we made this software in cooperation with other farmers, with software engineers. We already sell this software to farmers in Switzerland, Austria, Germany, and we thought it would be nice if we could get the boost for this software to kind of really scale it up. And we realized that it's just not considered that farmers make software. It's easy for me to apply for funds if I want to build a manure tank out of concrete, but it's almost impossible if I say, well, we just established a software. And this is really my appeal to you. I mean, there's so many policymakers among you, so many politicians. Think about that. The next time you're talking about how to increase resilience, how are you able to kind of create an enabling environment for young farmers? And really, I mean, everybody's talking about innovation, yeah? But innovation isn't just like big tech. We also need like tools for small scale farmers, because they are the majority of European agriculture, and they're the backbone of the countryside. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. Some great messages there. And you mentioned crowd farming as a way of making a close link between your customers, which could be local or even further away. And I live here in Brussels, and I have, through crowd farming, bought and had delivered to my home clementines, mangoes, pomegranates, pistachios, goat's milk, soaps, and all sorts of different things. So I think there's a real community and an interest of people making relationships directly with farmers in order to support their income, and this communication that you can have directly with customers to tell them how things have been on the farm, what's worked and what didn't work. I ordered apricots and the money was refunded when they explained that actually, because there'd been a big storm, all the fruit fell off the tree. So this is a really interesting way. You've talked about software, but getting this direct connection between the consumers and the farmers is, I think, a really important way of helping people to understand what's happening and build that resilience. Morgan, let me invite you to share what message and advice you'd give to other farmers about how they can make themselves more resilient.
Well, my main advice would be not to stay alone. When I have a problem on my farm, I call on my neighbors, the consumers, but actually mainly the other farmers. For me, it's really important. You might find it anecdotic, but for me, it is very, very important, because agroecology requires a very tight network of small, diversified farms. I need the manure from my friend who has a dairy farm. I exchange seeds with farmers from the surroundings. My tractor broke last month, and another neighbor came with his tractor to help sowing the cereals. And every Monday, I participate to a collective working day with 2 other market gardeners in order to do all the hard work that I would not be able to do alone. And this is part of my concern, is that if farmers, small-scale farmers, I mean, can no longer make a living out of their work, these great rural networks that make our European countryside so dynamic and so pleasant to live in will be threatened. And this is the reason why in the European Coordination Via Campesina, we say that Europe needs more farmers. And it is key. It's not the technology that will save us. It's not precision farming. It's not carbon credit. It is the fact that we can be numerous farmers. And for this, we really do need strong support for the small-scale family farmers. I mean, my farm is very small, so I don't receive any cap payment, nothing. So I do rely on fair prices. So I do rely on market regulation to be sure that we can have fair prices. And this is the case for the huge majority of farmers. We sell our production and we depend on fair prices to make a revenue. And I just want you to remind us that a great challenge is that the majority of farmers in Europe, of the 10 million farms, wonderful farms that we have in Europe, most of them will live below the poverty line. And it's not acceptable. We produce the food for you. And so we do need support. And we do not necessarily want like a lot of money to be sold to us. We want policies for market regulation, to have fair price. We sell very important things for all the citizens. And so it is fair to us to have fair prices. And so what we demand is market regulation, is protection against cheap food imports, which we all know that a relocalized food system is much better for the environment. And in terms of international solidarity, also, we believe that it is much better. Food sovereignty for us in Europe, but also food sovereignty for small-scale family farmers on the other regions in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. This is really what we need.
Wonderful. Thank you very much to Morgan and to Simon for sharing. You gave us a real perspective of the daily life on the farm, some of the challenges, the hard work, but the joy that comes from producing food that you know is enjoyed locally and is taken and contributing to people's well-being and nutrition. So thank you very much to both Simon and Morgan. The next person I'm going to introduce is Edina Oxko, who is a coordinator for a Horizon 2020 EU-funded project called Farmwell, and she's going to pick up on some of the issues around social resilience for farmers. So Edina, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for the opportunity to talk about our project at this event. So as you were saying, it's a Farmwell which stands shortly for improving farmers' well-being through social innovation, is a Horizon 2020 project. It's a European thematic network. And if you know, European thematic networks funded by Horizon are multi-actor approaches. So the main purpose is to bring practice together with research and get something practical and hands-on to farmers through this exchange. So in fact, we work with a big partnership, which includes a lot of farming organizations as well as research organizations. And the novelty of Farmwell is that while many thematic networks really focus on more technical kind of innovation, linked to a number of issues, water, soil, cropping systems, animal production, and so on, our network is really focusing on one key issue of resilience. And I think that can link to what Miranda was saying about this multidisciplinary approach, which is really the physical, mental, and social well-being of farmers. And we think it's a crucial issue, or we identified it as a crucial issue. So in this context, social innovation means for us, or in the project, to find really innovative, novel solutions to address the social challenges of farmers. And in the first year of the project, we are just concluding the first year, we did a mapping exercise in 6 countries and also wider in Europe. And we were trying to identify the key social challenges. And of course, it's very diverse, the challenges that farmers are facing. So starting from pressures on physical and mental well-being, stress factors. Also, of course, farming is often a physically demanding job. There is often lack of healthcare services in rural areas, which comes to another group of challenges, which is linked to the social dimension. So typically the negative perception sometimes from society. And of course, there are good solutions to reconnect to society, as Simon was mentioning. but also generally the lack of social services and services in rural areas linked to education, quality education, transport, and so on. And of course, we cannot avoid the economic factors which create a lot of pressure on farmers, from volatility of prices, low income in some sectors, land prices, and so on. And this particular pressure which is on small farms, as Morgan was saying. So we were just mapping these challenges in the first phase. So I invite you to please read the mapping report on our website, which is farmwell-age2020.eu. And with that, I would like to ask to play a short film in a second, which is really about the challenges that farmers are facing. We wanted to have a creative product. This product is produced by one of our partners, New Heroes, which is a creative company. And the purpose is really to talk about these issues. And I fully agree with Simon as well that communication is the key to that. So while it might not reflect the challenges of all farmers, the point is to talk about the challenges. And this film aims to trigger this kind of discussion between farmers. And then we are moving on to social innovation in the next phase of the project. So I don't know if the short film could be played just now, which is a teaser of a bigger film, which is accessible through our website.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Adina.
you.
We will play the short video now. Thank you very much to Adina, and I enjoyed watching that short video. And if you did too, go to the website there and you'll see the longer video which explores in more details some of these issues around the pressures along farming. We're now going to come to a panel conversation where we're going to explore some of the elements that have been brought up in our earlier conversations about what are the criteria for resilience and how do you measure it. And just a reminder for those of you who are interested in Miranda Mewison's excellent presentation, you will find that and all the PowerPoints from the conference on the website, both DG AGRI and of the conference. So, first of all, let me just introduce our panel members and then we'll get into the topics. So I'm delighted to introduce Kees Vermaan, who is the chair of the EC Mission Board for Soil, Health and Food and the former Dutch Minister of Agriculture. I have Francesca Henning-Posetti, who's a senior lawyer at John Deere GmbH, which is a company that's involved in agricultural technology. We have Michael Dimitrou, who's the Deputy Director General at the European Commission's DG AGRI. And we have Agnieszka Maliszewska, which I hope I pronounced correctly, the General Director for the Polish Chamber of Milk. So we've got 4 different experts from across Europe who are going to share some of their perspectives. But before we do that, just to get an introduction to the first topic where we're going to address issues around climate. And remember, we heard earlier about how food is right at the heart of the climate and health nexus. We have a short video which explains the relationship between farmers and climate. So let's watch that video.
In recent years, the weather has been very variable from one extreme to the other. Temperatures fluctuate widely in summer and winter. This means being prepared to invest in infrastructure, buildings, drinking and feeding systems, and machinery must work very low temperature. In the summer, we are getting more and more adept at regenerative grazing methods, and techniques, and the result of which is that even in drought conditions, we have green pastures and plenty of fodder in autumn.
The 5 last years, we have a lot of problem with some drought in Belgium. And this year, there was a lot of problem with flooding. Conservation farming we are trying to do is helping against that. But we have to do that long term before. The best thing to do is to is in the prevention of problem. Is the best way to act against shock.
So that sets the scene for us to be discussing in our first conversation with the panel. I'm going to be exploring the issue of climate. And Kees, I'm going to start with you because, of course, I think it was Tassius who said at the beginning that everything starts with the soil. And you are leading the EU mission on the soil. So can you explain to us a little bit about why soil is just so important for farms from a climate and environmental perspective?
Well, thank you. I'm present here, and well, I was at first. I would say I was touched by the play by Morgan about our role as farmers. You didn't mention, but I'm a farmer by birth in the family business. My sons are farmers, so we have a farm in the Netherlands. And all my lifetime, I was in university in politics and also in farming. And I was really touched by her plea because in Europe, we speak about agriculture. So the connection between farming, as they say in the United States, and culture, agriculture, that's a connection that is typically for the situation in Europe. And that's the role, that's the position of soil more specifically. Well, soils are crucial for this planet, for life on this planet, that's absolutely sure. But what was indicated by Morgan, that the role of the soil is silent. Huh? We can't hear the soil. There are no politicians that represent the role of the soil and the interest of the soil. It are the farmers that work on it. The farmers conserve it or spoil it. And that's the crucial point. Soils are unhealthy in the EU for more than 70%, and the mission is a scientific endeavor to increase the healthiness of the soil for at least 70% in the next 10 years, which is quite an ambition. But contaminated soils or compacted soils or soils that are vulnerable for erosion, they lose the capacity to produce good food and safe food because the contaminants can go into the products and they touch and they have serious consequences, could have serious consequences on human health. So the soil as the main factor of production for the farmer is not only essential for the farmer, but is essential for the whole society. Everything depends on healthy soils. Nowadays, carbon storage, water storage, safe food are the main points that the healthy soils can contribute to. And therefore, the mission is an endeavor to stimulate research on this issue, but not at the usual way of knowing how soil is, the elements of soil or the life in the soil, but to bring together, and that's the real ambition, the different persons, the different institutions, the different players that have to do with the soil. So the scientists, the farmers, the citizens at large, and the food processing industry together to bring the soil knowledge of scientists, the practical problems, and practical and many times inspirational new views of practitioners together with the people that should have to be should be in the position to understand what exactly is going on the farms, because the distance between what you get on your plate and the activities of the farmer is so enormously because of the food processing industry that's in between, and markets that are in between. So let's say the knowledge of how food is produced and how safe food is elementary for human health, and the costs of curing human diseases are enormous, as we can experience now with the COVID. So the relation between healthy soils and human health is absolutely underdeveloped. We know too little of that. So the mission is to bring practitioners and scientists and citizens together to reach a new, so to speak, transition of agriculture in order to make soils healthy again. Therefore, we propose a monitoring system that we can see that's enables us to see what are the conditions and how can we progress on these conditions, about the state of the soil, the healthiness of the soil, but also to create living labs, we call that. That's the direct connection between scientists, practitioners, farmers, foresters, city greeners, and the general public, that they can learn what the farmer is doing and how the farmer can change his methods of production in order to make soil healthier or to prevent that soils are deteriorating. Okay. And also to create lighthouses. Lighthouses, you could say, that's the showcases where everybody, but more specifically farmers and foresters, can come to and see what the new production methods or the new views or ways of doing and treating the soil or working together with the soil can contribute to not only healthier soils, but more importantly, to healthier and safer food. So also, and that's my final point, to increase diversity in types of farming. What we are discussing here is the agricultural policy that stimulates more unification instead of diversity. And so the transition, the European agricultural policy should envisage and should bring about in the next years would be, in my view, to stimulate diversity and give stimuli and facilitate those farmers, young farmers, who want to do it at another way, and another production method, another method of marketing their products. And a lot of energy is in young farmers. I see that with my own sons. Day to day, they are trying to overcome the difficulties, not only of climate change, but also of the market conditions. And therefore, I think when we talk about the transition of agriculture, the health of the soil is absolutely an elementary principle here. If the soil is not made healthy again in the future, then we will not be successful in the transition of agriculture to bring about more healthy and safe food, and to increase the resilience in the countryside, and make new young farmers ready and motivated for this transition of agriculture that's going to take place in the next 10 years. So the mission is there, the money is there. So we don't need an let's say normal program of research. We need a new program, a new paradigm for research. Not only the scientists who grab the money, so to speak, and do their job, and the farmers do their own job. No, we should bring them together. Only in this way, to engage farmers and practitioners and the general public and the scientists together, we can be successful. And there is still an enormous endeavor to take that. And I think we are on the brink of a new age there. Thank you.
Thanks, Case. You gave us a lot of insight there, and I think that your final message there was so important, that the need to move away from this process of uniformity towards diversity and biodiversity and diversification, and the need to bring farmers and scientists together to innovate, I think, is a really interesting message. Let me now turn to Francesca, and of course you also have a specific role as the chair of the AI group at SEMA, and we heard from Simon how he has used digital tools both for his regular farming but also to innovate in the way that he reaches out to customers and even to develop new software. To what extent do you think digitization is an opportunity for farmers, and how do they get to grips with it?
So thank you very much for having me here today. What I wanted to say was very impressed with what Morgan and Simon said, because what I realized is that we request a lot as a society from our farmers. We want them to be engaged, increase production to feed the world in the coming year. We request them to have better quality food, to be reliable with the better products, to produce healthy products, to do it in the shorter time and with a constant quality. I heard about Simon's problem with the cabbage. We request and to do this in a sustainable way and also to an affordable prices. So this is really a lot that we request to our farm managers, because those people are feeding our society, and we need them in order to reach the goals that we heard before from the previous speaker, where they say, well, the world needs an increase of production in the next years. And of course, to do so in such a short time of frame, we need more digitalization. As in the SEMA, we are discussing a lot about what is the role of artificial intelligence in farming and those new technologies. And the response is, we are trying to reduce uncertainties. We are trying to make work and the work as a farmer and agricultural manager more plannable, to reducing fatigue by, for example, providing some automatization for operation or supporting the farmers, but also with the data analysis to reduce the uncertainties, anticipating events. Of course, we could not anticipate the pandemic, but it showed how important it is, for example, to anticipate machine downs in order to have a reliability of the production, in order to continue the production. How important it is also to keep the farmers connected with each other, not only like Morgan said with the neighbor, but also leveraging the power of the knowledge of so many farmers in the region, in the country, but also all over Europe. So what IE can do is provide this kind of support. Autonomous machines can help to optimize the work management. Of course, they need to be scalable to the different realities. It can prevent dangerous situations and also enhance the activities in agriculture. What we're seeing is also the difficulty to have people in agriculture. We have a lack of labor due to a migration for the rural area to the urban areas because of lack of or perception of lack of opportunities. And this is something that we could work against by providing new chances with new technology and changing also at the same time the perception of farmers. Farmers are becoming more and more expert not only in farming technologies, but also in IT technology. We see a change, a generational change. The new farmers upcoming and the new generation upcoming are more digital expert, as we saw with Simon, that impressively show us that he not just took the needs of the sector, but also programmed our own software. So what we need is to enhance also these capabilities for farmers to develop insight in new technology. So we need more education or education opportunities in order to make, on one side, fatigue management or fatigue in agricultural environment more manageable, to have a better quality and more plannable quality of life, to reduce the uncertainties, and also, very important, to increase sustainability by providing economic return for the farmers. If there is an economic return, farmers will be more open to say, well, let's adopt a new technology that reduce my consumption. And in this way, we reduce pollution. Let's have a system that may helps me to lower the impact on the soil or to better the soil by just the nutrients that are needed for the soil, so that this enhance not only the productivity, but also on the long run, the enhancement of the soil quality, but also have support the climate protection by using what it's needed for the kind of production that the farmer put in place, and helping the farmers to leverage these tools that the new technologies are developing for agriculture. So more and more agricultural managers, contractors, and user of machines are becoming technological entrepreneurs. And we are willing to support them in order to tailor the technology and to scale them to their needs.
Thank you. Let me just ask you another question, which I think would be an interesting one, which is there's quite a difference between developing a small software program to do a specific activity and AI systems, which sound like they're a completely different level of complexity and cost and investment. Can you give us some insight on what we actually mean by AI systems that might be useful for small-scale farmers like Simon or Morgan?
So AI sounds so far away, but it's in your all-day experience. When you look to an information on Google, you're using an AI application. So AI and machine learning is what is intended as tool, as powerful tool in order to fulfill a lot of different activities. You can apply machine learning to automation in order to have particular repetitive task done by. You can use machine learning in order to anticipate events like weather events, but also plan the kind of seeds, for example, that have the better chance on your field, to better the qualities, to even to reduce the application of chemicals or a pollutant. In this sense, this is machine learning, and the data analysis is what can help you. And what seems to be so far away, it's already used because you're already there. You're using Google, for example, to know what's the weather, or the weather channel, or what other application, know what the best weather is to your harvest, or to know when to apply fertilizer. And those technologies may help you not only with that, but also pairing those information with the machine that you are using in order to have the best setting of the machine in the shorter time frame, or use best application, the best level of application of nutrients, of spraying in a more targeted way. This is a benefit for the farmers because it provides a return and an economical return by reducing expenses and allocating resources, but also for our environment, because we're reducing non-necessary application or non-necessary nutrients on the field, for example. Okay. So this is a win-win solution with those kind of technologies.
Great, thank you very much. We're now going to think and reflect a little bit more on some of the economic aspects of resilience. And just to set that up, we've got a short video to show you which highlights some of the issues of economic resilience for the farming community. Let's watch that, and then I'll bring our final two panel members in.
For many years, we were always afraid that the calamity was going to be coming from climate. What we were never really expecting was what happened with COVID and how the market basically froze. Nothing could actually counter what we were losing in terms of our normal market. And that is definitely something that still today we're learning how to adapt to and finding new ways to bounce back.
Today, we are facing an economic crisis. In the worst case scenario, we will have to give up some of the animals so that we can get over the price increase. Diesel, electricity, gas.
Thank you, by the way, for those of you who've sent us in questions. Please, I'm going to encourage you to use the Slido tool to send questions, because we'll be asking our panelists and earlier speakers to respond and come in on this conversation. Because the question of resilience, it affects us all. So it's a question I think that we would all like to have some conversation on. I'd now like to introduce Agnieszka Mależewska, who is the COGECA First Vice President, and of course comes from Poland, and there she's dealing with the issue of milk. And this is an area, of course, where the economic aspects are very sharp. There's a very tight margin for many people working in the dairy industry. So resilient farms, Agnieszka, are more profitable in the medium and long term. So what are the key drivers that farmers can use to increase their economic resilience?
Thank you for introducing myself. Thank you for inviting me in this meeting. And really, this is a very important question. This is an important question because I think we believe that resilient farms are more profitable in the medium and long term. But the question is, I think it's my opinion, the question is, how can we improve the resilience of farmers? And what policy support the farmers need to become more resilient? I would like to say that the key in this key factor is economic. Economic because all discussion, all information in the movies was information about the crisis and about the economy. And in my opinion, farmers must have an adequate and finally satisfaction income from their activities, so that they can plan their business, because this is a business, because it's not only type of life, but farming is a business, obviously, to take account of all the difficult involvement, like climate, like phytosanitary, like animal welfare, like market, and obviously, etc. too. Today, farmers' income are only 50% of average salary in different sectors in economy. And I see from my colleague, and I see in this presentation, previous presentation information, all policy, all type of support will be fair for all farmers. In this morning, Commissioner Wojciechowski said, a fair policy for all farmers. Yes, I this, but when farmers have only 50% of different type of sector, this is not motivated for to stay in farming, for to stay in farm, for to developing a new generation in farmers. And this is the first and most important obstacles that farmers have to meet. And if we improve this, if we will be easier for farmers to achieve some key elements. Firstly, increase farms, and obviously, secondly, to developing a new generation, because at the moment, discussion about the new generation in farmers is very, very important. And finally, building a new agriculture, sustainability open to new challenge like European Green Deal. And if we're talking about the policy, if of course is very necessary to financial and policy support for farmers. At the moment, this extremely important document Commission show us, and information from all is important. The new CIP policy will support not only farmers, but the climate, environment, animal welfare too. And I think we should know about this. What farmers should be a center point among this discussion, among this document, and among this type of information. For why this is very important, because every day I see information about liquidation of agricultural farmers, and young people decide to finish this farming because can see a new an opportunity for this. And in fact, a bigger share of farmers' income must come from market. Obviously, but this way we have been quite supportive of maintenance of market-oriented CIP policy. We need fair, transparent, better function, active food chain operating to internal and the world market. And finally, and back to policy support, because this type of support is a good cooperated between all European, not only European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development under CIP, but all type of funds. And the next, this of support plus long-term agri-vision, risk management tools for farmers, and will be a new type of farming and will be support farmers, especially will support the new farmers generation. And when my previous speakers told about artificial intelligence, about new interesting and very digitalization type of support for farmers. Yes, this is true, and this is important for all situation for farmers. But I think this type of supporting, like financial support, is very important, and all tools about I told. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. And let me now bring in Michal for the next area where we're going to explore the issue of our rural communities. And we've heard very powerful messages from our farmers, from Simon and Morgan, and from other speakers who've talked about the challenges of low incomes for farmers, that the vast majority of small farmers are below the poverty line. The average farming income is below 50% of the average. And Agnieszka has just talked about, in the last few years, seeing farmers going out of business and leaving farming because they can't make a living. We won't have resilient rural areas if we don't have resilient farming. And several speakers have spoken about the need for policy support. Now, this is your job description, isn't it? It's policy support for farmers in rural areas. So what can you tell us about what the Commission has in its policy toolbox to support the economic development in rural areas?
Well, thank you very much. I'm afraid I will not have enough time to explain you everything we have in our toolbox to support farming, farmers, and rural economy and territories to make them resilient. I mean, as you mentioned, and it has been mentioned here by previous speakers, I think we are living now a rapidly changing world, which is confronted with a landscape of risks. And climate and environment has been mentioned several times, but not only. There are a lot of other risks, geopolitical, cybersecurity, economic. You can see now the increase of price of energy, the effects on the agri-food sector. We have all the time amended the common agricultural policy, which is the policy we have, which is a common policy. And every time we try to make it fit for purpose, and every reform try to bring in elements to address the new challenges. I think in a positive way, to start in a positive way, the COVID pandemic has shown that our agri-food system, they've been resilient. And thanks God, this was very good, because it would have been the last thing we have needed in a health and sanitary crisis, where we were all locked down in our houses, teleworking, if we could have not get our food. And I think this resilience system gives us comfort, and I think we have to do everything possible to make it even more resilient. Well, when we look into a new round, of course, we look to resilience and we look to sustainability from the three aspects: the economic, environment, climate, and we address all of them, and we want all of them to be well served by the common agricultural policy. And not only, I mean, I would say common agricultural policy, it is our main tool, but we have a lot of other policies and instruments, and I think we work a lot in the context of the Green Deal, our Farm to Fork, biodiversity strategy, to make the whole food chain and to make our farming and our rural economy resilient, and to look to these aspects. Of course, we have instruments built in this policy since a long time to try to address all these aspects. Since your question focused more on the economic, I will try to address first economic, but then I will also look into the environment, climate, and social. Okay. So we know exactly that the farmers' income is below the income in other sectors, and this is why the main instrument of the policy, the income support, the direct payments, is still maintained and remain a substantial instruments of our common agricultural policy. But of course, the issue of fairer distribution of income was one of our preoccupations for this reform. And we have to try to build in a mechanism where a redistribution towards the small and medium should be favored by all the member states. And there is now a mechanism there. We want it to be even more, let's say, restrictive, but in the co-legislation, this mechanism is there with additional flexibility. And of course, this basic income support remain a key element of our policy. Of course, it's not a free gift. I mean, the farmers, they are bound to respect a number of conditions, and especially, these conditions refer to environment and climate. We have this conditionality, which we will enhance this time, and we want them to deliver more on public goods and engage in this path of green transition. But then there are other instruments there to support, let's say, the economic aspects of resilience and sustainability. We still have voluntary couple support for the sector in needs. We have a lot of other elements, redistributive payments I mentioned already. But one of the novelties in this period is we have reconstructed the green architecture very much. And this is going to provide, on one side, incentives to farmers to change, to enter into this green and digital transition path, and to incentivize them to change their method of production and to take into account the climate change and environment and loss of biodiversity. And we have invented a new instrument, which is the eco schemes, and we have given examples which kind of eco schemes the member state they can offer to the farmers So I think there are a lot of scope that farmers can choose these eco schemes and they gain additional funds. Now we have reserved 25% of the first pillar budget to incentivize farmers to enter into this new method of production.
Okay.
I was very glad that Simon and Margan mentioned and in their advice to their fellow.
Yes.
They mentioned some aspects which I want to also refer. So innovation. I mean, we think that technologies, it's a driver of change, and it will be one of our guarantee for resilience. And we want our farming sector, and not only farming, but also the rural economy, to enter into this digital transformation, first of all, and to adopt these new technologies. And I think here, we already created the mechanism where we can combine research, innovation with the farmers' need, and we have created this European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture, where these actors, they can sit together and develop practical solutions for their problem, transforming the research and innovative ideas in practical solutions, and then trying to spread them after the testing in one specific project to other and offer like a general solution. And we also reserve funds under the investment to allow farmers to get into these investments. I mean, I told you I can say a lot, but I understand the time is running out.
Of course, and thank you for having so much to be able to share. But I do want to be able to come to some of the questions that we've received from the audience. So if I can invite all my speakers to be ready to respond on them, because we've got a couple of questions that have come in that are really worth exploring. Kees, I'm going to come to you with this first question, because the message is that, is it possible to feed the majority of citizens with the scale of the farms that we've heard? We heard about Simon and Morgan, who are running small-scale farms, and they're vibrant, dynamic, they're engaged, they're updating and diversifying what they're doing. But as we've heard, they're small-scale. And if you think about the size of the EU population and the fact we're one of the world's biggest exporters and importers of food, do all these wonderful, bright little examples, is it realistic to expect that that will reach the ability to feed our populations? Kees, I'm going to ask you if you can answer that one.
Sorry. Well, I think yes, but the system will undergo major changes, because, as you mentioned, we are the main exporter. Huh? The second, the Netherlands is the second agricultural exporter of the world. Huh? So the EU is the biggest exporter, but that will undergo a drastic change, because we are setting the marks higher now for quality for food. So the imports from basic components, that's soybeans, etc., from other parts of the world, will diminish, because they can't meet the standards we will be setting for our type of production and our type of healthy food. So our exports will also deteriorate, bringing in the possibility to feed our own people, but with a different set of products and a different ways of producing. So the autarky, so to speak, for Europe will increase. And that's a general development worldwide, that the globalization, which was preached so for about 30 years, is on its way back till a certain point. And agriculture is one of the main projects that will undergo this change of deglobalization, because of quality and standards that we will uphold here in the EU. So no fear that we cannot feed our own people, but that will be quite another type of agriculture, and exports will be brought down and imports also.
Okay, Thank you for that. And I think it struck me very much listening to some of the stories that we heard earlier, the power of the local networks. When Morgan talked about the fact, when her tractor broke, her neighbor came and lent his tractor, and they worked collectively to do things. The resilience of these local networks, and Simon talked about linking up with local chefs and finding a way, they couldn't open their restaurants. He had vegetables that he was normally going to grow for them, and they invented new products that then won prizes, and it created new market categories. This connection between farmers and their local food networks, it came to my mind when I was listening to both Morgan and Simon, how much they didn't just identify them as themselves as farmers who produce food, but as part of this locally connected network of people who are engaged in a food system, and that a problem shared is a problem resolved together. And I think the key elements of resilience came through so clearly in their examples. We do have some questions, and I don't know if we're still able to get Simon and Morgan back online to answer them, because people have said, what would be your top 3 advice, lessons from the COVID crisis to give to fellow farmers? Your message has been so inspirational that people want to know. What would be your 3 top things? And if we can't get you back online, maybe we can get you to answer them in the Q&A, because it's got several upvotes, that question. Your messages were clearly inspiring people. We also had someone who had a Christmas wish for Morgan's tractor to be repaired or sorted out, and highlighted that we have a John Deere representative on the panel, and they were invited to reflect on the Christmas spirit to support Morgan on that. Let's explore a little bit more, because we have probably another 5 or 10 minutes in this issue, and it's a question of resilience. We've heard examples of some of the challenges, things that might be predictable, because they're more likely to be the kinds of things that farmers would think about, like weather. If you remember the video where we had the farmer from Belgium who said, look, we had drought for a couple of years, and this year we had flooding. So the changing weather is something that farmers perhaps have had to deal with in the past. But COVID was a completely new game changer in terms of the disruption to logistics, supply chain, etc. So farmers have had a lot to cope with. And the fact that they are still farming and still continuing, I think, is really positive, but something we need to bear in mind. We do have a question actually also for Francesca. Maybe I could bring you... we have Morgan and Simon. What are your top 3 advices to give to farmers? Everything you've been through in the last year, and you've already shared with us the power of network. You've talked about innovation, seeing yourself differently, working collaboratively. What else would you share?
Shall I start?
Yes, go ahead.
The farmers know how to do our job. Actually, the problems isn't with the politics. So my advice are with the EU, rather, because I really trust on all farmers' capacity to adapt. But we do need you to shift paradigm. You need to think that the priority is to feed the people, the European people, and that for this, the 10 million farms within the EU is the best thing that we should count on. So instead of thinking about growth and exports and all these market things, the most important is that we defend these 10 million farms in Europe and try to increase them. And this also would be the criteria to know if we are going into the right direction in terms of agroecology. Because agroecology with no farmers is not agroecology. It's green tech, all you things, but it's not climate friendly, and it will not be good for biodiversity. We need many farmers. So this should really be the criteria of a successful farm-to-fork strategy. We do support the farm-to-fork strategy, but if it is not based on many farmers, it will be a failure.
Okay.
So please defend the small-scale family farmers.
Thank you. Support getting the policy framework right, making sure that it's supportive of small family farmers and is linked to both a decent quality of life for farmers and decent quality of food for consumers. I think those are great messages. Simon.
Well, I think the whole COVID pandemic showed us something really interesting. I think there was never a time in human history when more people spent time in their kitchens and with cooking and had a real close relationship to food. I mean, so many people learn how to make bread and this is, I mean, you could laugh about it, but in fact, this is a unique opportunity for us as farmers to kind of link up again with society, because I think that's the crucial problem. Miranda was talking about the silos. A lot of people who are engaged in agriculture are really in silos. There is no, just an echo chamber, and there is no real communication with the world outside. And I think that's a big problem. And we really have to focus on how are we able to improve these networks along the whole value chain, but also outside of the value chain, with schools, with institutions, with to form new alliances. I think these days are over where we think that we can solve every problem just on our own. Corona shows us that's actually quite clear. We cannot solve these problems alone in our companies. We're not able to solve this problem on not even national level. We need a global kind of justice to solve all these problems, and therefore we have to create better networks among each other.
Thank you. So very consistent messages from both Simon and Morgan to see yourselves part of the network, but also to make sure that the policy framework is appropriate and correct. And in fact, that was one of the questions that we'd had in from the audience, who said, do you think that the CAP is appropriately designed to help farmers be resilient, or are CAP incentives promoting poor resilient farming systems? So I think this is a very genuine question we need to reflect on when we look at how we address the agro-farming environment in the future. As we're coming towards the end of our time together, I'd like us to perhaps think back, and we'll look now at the word cloud that we created at the beginning, because I asked you the question, what does resilience mean to you? And you had loads of great ideas, and we'll show you the image that was created with your word cloud, because words that were coming out such as, flexibility, stable incomes, young farmers, the capacity for change, adaptation, and here we have it, sustainability. These were the ideas, the elements that you thought were important in resilience, and we've touched on some of them. We obviously haven't had time to deal with all of them. And Miranda gave us a conceptual framework to understand how to measure it, which elements you build up to understand how resilient your agriculture and food system is. So I'm going to close this session by saying that we began with Tassos earlier saying that it has been the most difficult report that the EU's had to do on the agricultural outlook because of the disruptions of the last 12 months. And of course, the agricultural outlook document goes to 2030, and it's hard to predict the kinds of changes that will be coming. We have huge volatility in commodities and pricing for energy and fertilizers, the inputs that farmers need. There was difficulty getting stuff across border if you needed goods and services, and Simon explained just what a challenge that can be for a farmer who happens to be situated near a border region. We heard also about the vulnerability of farming communities to the economic changes. Many of them are already below the poverty line, so they're very sensitive to any changes. We heard examples of hope, the examples of change, and how farmers tried to do different things and explored new markets, supported each other. We heard new economic models, crowd farming, more close connections between citizens and directly with farmers, so that more of the value goes straight back to farmers. And we were reminded, I think it was one of our earlier speakers who reflected on the word agriculture, because it has agri and culture. And it's a reminder that farming is the central part of our communities. Without good quality soil that's in good condition, we can't produce the food. Without the food, we don't survive. So I'm going to close this session on resilience with a reminder that a resilient food and agriculture system is the key foundation of a resilient society. And as we think about building back better, and we hope for a world post-pandemic, food and agriculture will have to be at its beating heart. Thank you, and I'm closing this session, and we will start again at 2:30.